Am I crossing a Rubicon here, chatting about federal troops in DC and states? Hey, my friend, you ever wonder what it means when federal troops roll into a city like it's their backyard? I'm thinking about Trump's move in August 2025, taking over DC's police and sending 800 National Guard troops in, saying crime's out of control. He's even hinting at doing this in places like New York or Chicago. But like, crime's down 26% in DC and 28% in Baltimore this year. So I'm scratching my head, asking like Socrates would, is this about safety or is it kind of power grab? Picture Jesus telling a story about a shepherd who starts swinging a sword at his own flock. That's what this feels like. And Kant, he'd probably say, hold up, does this respect everyone's freedom? Let's dig into this, you and me, and figure out if we're seeing a modern Rubicon moment. So, what's the deal with the law? All right, let's talk law. Don't worry, I'll keep it chill. There's this thing called the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which basically says the feds can't use soldiers to play cop unless Congress or the Constitution says it's cool. It came from the Reconstruction days, when folks were freaked out about federal troops bossing citizens around, like Rome's armies stomping through towns. There's an exception, though, the Insurrection Act of 1807. It lets the president send troops to stop rebellions or enforce federal laws if a state can't handle it. But here's the kicker. Washington, D.C. isn't a state, so Trump can take over its police for 30 days under the Home Rule Act. That's what he did, putting Attorney General Pam Bondi in charge. Now, when it comes to actual states, it gets trickier. In Los Angeles, Trump sent National Guard troops to deal with protests over immigration raids. And Governor Newsom was like, whoa, that's not legal. He sued, saying it breaks the Posse Comitatus Act, but a court backed Trump, claiming he's protecting federal interests. Still, groups like Human Rights Watch are shouting, this could turn ugly. I'm with Socrates here asking, if crime's dropping, why are we sending troops? Kant would probably tell me any law letting the overrun states better hold up for everyone, or it's just wrong. It feels like the law's a tightrope, one misstep, and we're in dangerous territory. History's got some stories to tell. You brought up the Whiskey Rebellion, and I love that you went there. It's such a good example. Back in 1794, George Washington marched a militia into Pennsylvania because farmers were mad about a whiskey tax and causing trouble. The law back then, the Militia Act of 1792, let him do it since the rebellion was messing with federal taxes. But here's the thing. Washington used local militia, not a big federal army, and he kept things calm, no bloodbath. Compare that to now, Trump's got National Guard troops in D.C. with ammo and MREs, but there's no real rebellion. In LA, he even sent Marines, which feels way heavier than Washington's vibe. I'm thinking of other times this happened, like in 1957, when Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock to make sure schools desegregated. Totally legit, since Arkansas was defying federal law. Or in 1992, when Bush used the Insurrection Act for the L.A. riots, but only after California asked for help. Then there's 2020, when Trump sent the D.C. National Guard out during the George Floyd protests. And folks were like, wait, where's the Insurrection Act? Now in 2025, it's the same deal. X-posts are buzzing with people calling this overreach. I'm imagining Jesus telling a story. A man guarded his village with soldiers, but their heavy steps crushed the flowers. Socrates would nudge me. When does help become harm? History's screaming at us to be careful. Too much federal muscle can tip the scales toward tyranny. Soldiers aren't cops, you know? You nailed it when you said soldiers aren't trained to be cops. I mean, think about it. The military's taught to take out enemies, not calm down protests or read Miranda rights. Cops learn local laws, how to de-escalate and use stuff like tasers or batons. Soldiers, they've got rifles built for war. When you put National Guard troops on DC streets or Marines in LA, it's like sending a bulldozer to plant a garden. I read that criminologists like Alex Vitalis say this kind of thing just makes people angrier. Look at 2020 when tear gas hit peaceful protesters. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, some guy named David Holt leading them, says local cops know their communities better than federal troops ever could. Jesus might put it like this. A soldier's spear cuts where a shepherd's crook soothes. Kant would probably say it's flat out wrong to send people into a job they're not trained for. It disrespects everyone involved. And Socrates, he'd poke at me. Can someone enforce laws they don't even know? You're so right, soldiers aren't equipped for this, and it risks turning streets into battlegrounds instead of neighborhoods. What's the big idea here? Let's get philosophical for a sec, because you love that stuff. The 10th Amendment says states get to handle their own business, and folks like Benjamin Franklin were all about that. Franklin was super suspicious of standing armies. He wanted local militias so the feds couldn't bully people. John Locke, who the founders read like a playbook, said government only works if people consent. So when troops show up in a state without the governor saying, yeah, we need you, doesn't that break the deal? Kant would tell me any rule about sending troops has to work for everyone, no exceptions, or it's not fair. If Trump can just roll into LA or threaten Chicago without a clear reason, that's not respecting states as equals. Socrates would lean in and ask, if states are sovereign, why are we treating them like kids who need a babysitter? Jesus might compare states to neighbors, each deserving their own space, not some federal landlord barging in. X posts are full of people worried about losing local control, and I get it. It feels like the whole idea of our republic is wobbling. Philosophy's telling us to keep power in check, or we're flirting with something that doesn't look like freedom. Wrapping it up, so here we are, my friend. The Posse Comitatus Act's supposed to stop the feds from playing army in our cities, but CC's weird federal status lets Trump pull moves like taking over the police. States, though, that's a harder line to cross without a real rebellion, and courts are starting to push back, like in Newsom's lawsuit. History shows us guys like Washington and Eisenhower used federal force carefully, not like a habit, as you put it. And you're spot on about soldiers not being cops. Their training and gear can make things worse, not better. What do we do with all this? Jesus would probably say we need to guide our communities with care, not force. Socrates would keep asking, what's the real goal here? Kant would push for rules that respect everyone's freedom. As Trump talks about sending troops to more cities, I'm wondering, are we guarding our republic or are we crossing our own Rubicon? Let's keep talking, my friend, and hold on to that spark of liberty.